Inside America's Boardrooms, the informational show for board members and corporate secretaries. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, Diligent, PwC, Center for Audit Quality, the Conference Board, and Corporate Board Member. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, Donnelly Financial Solutions, and the Society for Corporate Governance.
Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, the CEO of Boardroom Resources and the co-founder and editor-at-large of Corporate Board Member Magazine. We're here at the Society for Corporate Governance annual conference in Washington, D.C., and it's a great collection of GCs and corporate secretaries that obviously have a big influence on the board. We're fortunate this morning to have the opportunity to interview our kickoff speaker at the conference here today, and that is Commissioner Robert Jackson, Jr., who's the commissioner with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, otherwise known as the SEC. So welcome, Rob.
Thanks so much for having me.
So there's a lot of companies that are probably happy that we have a commissioner that has a good corporate law background, and particularly with such a high-profile company like Wachtell Lipton. Obviously, that immediately says that you're involved and very knowledgeable about corporate law. That's a big issue. So first question's an easy one, sort of how's your experience been since you've been elected or confirmed?
Well, it's been an extraordinary privilege. And I am very, very proud to be an alum of Wachtell Lipton, and I feel very lucky to have learned so much corporate law at the feet of their terrific attorneys, including David Katz and Sebastian Niles. Little known fact, Sebastian Niles was my office mate when we were first-year associates. He went on to become a partner at the firm, and he's a wonderful, thoughtful counsel. I feel very lucky to come to work every day and work with the amazing people at the SEC. And if there's one thing that I've learned in my first 4 or 5 months, it's that the staff at that agency are just absolutely extraordinary lawyers. And the thing to know is that any one of them could go on to an incredibly successful career as a partner of a major law firm. And instead, so many of them come to our building each day and work to protect investors. So I find it inspiring to work with them. I feel very fortunate to do so.
So this morning you gave a great talk on cyber and answered everybody's questions, which there was a long line of people that obviously had questions. And you also gave a talk on cyber at the Tulane Corporate Law Institute, which is another great event where a good collection of people. Your talk in Tulane was titled Corporate Governance on the Front Lines of America's Cyber War. Can you sort of share both your pointed comments this morning and from the Tulane, just to our audience as a sort of an overview of what your feelings are about cyber?
Sure, and I'll tell you, if there's one thing that keeps me up at night as an SEC commissioner, it's what's going on in cyber. Folks in the national security community have said this, folks in corporate America have said this. This is a war. American companies are under attack 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And my worry is that we are asking them basically to defend themselves against this overwhelming, increasingly dangerous attack. And by the way, we know what happens when they fail to do that. We know what happens when companies are breached. And what happens is millions of Americans' data are lost or stolen or used against them in a way that we just can't accept as a nation. So the reason I've been focused on it is, my view, is that American companies really are on the front lines of a battle to protect Americans' information, and we need to give boards of directors the tools they need to win that war. And in my speeches, I focused on 3 things I think any board should be thinking about when it comes to cyber. First, making sure investors get timely, accurate disclosure when cyber events happen. Second, making sure insider trading policies are set up in a way to make sure that insiders are not trading around the time of a cyber event. And then third, and I think most importantly, that there be internal controls, policies, and procedures that make sure that information on the ground in the company about any cyber hack makes its way up to the C-suite and the boardroom, so those officials have the information they need to protect our companies.
So cyber is one of the things, you had an interesting question of why cyber different than anything else. Certainly for a board member it's different because most board members during their career their business career didn't deal with cyber. They didn't have hacks. They had a different set of risks to deal with. Cyber is hard to get your arms around, and particularly as a board member. So that makes it doubly hard, okay? So is there any foundational guidance at this point, maybe not as commissioner, because I don't know, whether you can offer advice as commissioner, but from your experience, is there any foundational issues that you would say, okay, we expect a board member to do this, even though you don't know cyber, you don't know sometimes when you've been hacked. Okay, it's a very hard risk to get your arms around.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. And I should say, by the way, I don't provide advice to companies, and if I did, it'd be worth what they paid for it. Yeah. But here's what I'll say more generally. Our guidance that we issued in this subject in January was very clear about the kinds of things we expect from corporate boards of directors, and I actually urge them to take a careful look at that guidance, to get briefed on what that guidance says and what it really means, because we're pretty clear in the guidance about wanting folks to have internal controls in place to make sure their insider trading policies address these issues. And my suggestion to boards has been to push them even further and ask them to ask themselves whether or not they have the kinds of internal reporting procedures in place that get that information about a cyber risk from the tech folks or wherever it is in the firm up to the boardroom. And we've been to this movie before. Accounting is an incredibly difficult issue, one that in 2001 not every board knew as much about as they could or should, and we have built over the years under Sarbanes-Oxley a series of controls that takes accounting information from the ground up to the C-suite and the boardroom and the audit committee, where it belongs. And I'm wondering whether or not we need to start building internal policies and procedures at companies that are like that for cyber. In part because, like accounting, cyber has its own language. It's incredibly technical, and as you pointed out, unlike accounting, where some directors already have some knowledge of that, cyber is a completely new world for a lot of corporate directors.
Your example was perfect on building up the financial controls into the audit committee. Well, most cyber has ended up in the audit committee only because, except for banks where there's actually a risk committee, but
where else should it go? I mean, I think a lot of boards are asking themselves, where should we report this to?
And I think that's one of the reasons that we'll see more risk committees. I think because audit committee agendas are full and they should be handling the stuff that relates to financial reporting, but all of a sudden this risk is so encompassing, okay, that I just think it is one of the things that, when we talk about taking down the country or taking down companies, this is a very serious risk, and we got to figure it out.
Absolutely right, and I want to say something about that, which is there have been a bunch of proposals kicking around Capitol Hill about getting more expertise on cyber into the boardroom, and I want to urge companies out there to really think hard about whether they have the kinds of knowledge in the boardroom right now that they need to grapple with this issue. I'm not saying you have to hire a cyber expert. I'm not saying that's going to be right for every board. But boy, if I were on a corporate board these days, I would be out there looking for directors who can come in with some knowledge on that subject, just to help educate the board and prepare us if we ever end up in that situation.
Well, the good news is we're seeing a lot more what I call next-gen board members that are younger that may have a better feel for this. What hasn't worked is when boards have tried to go out and get single-focus board members, meaning they don't understand the other principles of running a company, but they're very, very knowledgeable in cyber. That hasn't worked because they can't contribute. There's so many areas that they can't contribute. So I think as time goes, we'll fill that gap, okay, because of everybody's experiences. But boards shouldn't be afraid to go out and bring in experts on the topic, because one of the challenges I know that I would have is I don't even know if I'm being told the right thing. Mm-hmm. So first of all, I have to understand whether my expert is truly giving me the right information. Then once I have that confidence, then I'm probably in better shape. But a lot of boards wouldn't know whether they're being told the honest truth or not. So
absolutely.
All that makes it a tough topic. We're certainly glad that there's somebody on top of that, on the commission. I want to thank you for taking the time and joining us, and we really appreciate that the advice that you offered.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.
Join us again next week for Inside America's Boardrooms. Brought to you with knowledge partners Diligent, PwC, Center for Audit Quality, the Conference Board, and Corporate Board Member. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, Donnelly Financial Solutions, and the Society for Corporate Governance.